Little House on the Prairie is a reminder of when things were simpler for us in our lives those 45 years ago. I realized that the disappointment and the hardships were going to happen to lead to the better, more exciting stuff.
Melissa.
Back here.
Welcome home, half pint.
It's really amazing.
Look at this.
Melissa Gilbert begged Michael Landon to change the scripts of Little House on the Prairie. But America wanted romance, and she was forced to deliver. At 15, she had never been kissed. And at 23, Dean Butler knew it was wrong, yet they filmed scene after scene while 100 crew members watched. Her mother stood crying in the shadows, and viewers wrote angry letters. Now, both stars are finally admitting what everyone suspected, but no one would say. The truth about their on-screen relationship is darker than anyone imagined. Melissa Gilbert's life began with heartbreak. Before she even had a name, she was born on May 8, 1964, in Los Angeles. Her biological parents, Kathy Wood and David Darlington, were newly engaged and already had 3 kids each from past marriages. Just one day after her birth, they gave her up for adoption, saying they couldn't afford to raise a 7th child. Melissa never spent a single full night with them. She was adopted immediately by actor and comedian Paul Gilbert and his wife Barbara Crane, a dancer and actress. That instant separation stayed with her forever. Years later, in her book Prairie Tale, she confessed, "A large part of my life has been an illusion." Paul Gilbert wasn't just a father. He was her world. But that world fell apart on February 13th, 1976. Melissa was only 11 when she was told that her dad had died of a stroke. It made sense, as he had suffered one before, but the truth was far more painful. Paul Gilbert had died by suicide. For decades, no one told her he'd been a World War II fighter pilot who lived with constant, unbearable pain from injuries he had sustained. The Veterans Administration was caring for him, but even they couldn't help him cope. By the time Melissa found out the truth at age 44, it shattered her. She told Oprah she was barely functioning for weeks and ended up hiring a private investigator to learn what really happened. She needed answers. She needed to understand why the one person who saved her from being unwanted was suddenly gone, and no one had told her the truth. Even though she was adopted, Melissa had show business in her blood. Her adoptive mother, Barbara Crane, was the daughter of Harry Crane, the man who created the Honeymooners and helped reinvent the Dean Martin show with the idea of celebrity roasts. Harry had written for the Oscars, the Emmys, and even the Golden Globes. He was a giant in early television, and that legacy shaped the world Melissa would grow up in. Barbara, too, had her own career in entertainment. That meant Melissa was raised in a family where TV sets, scripts, and red carpets weren't out of reach. They were part of her daily life. That showbiz energy flowed through the entire family. In 1967, Paul and Barbara adopted another child, Jonathan Gilbert. A few years later, in 1975, Barbara had a daughter named Sarah with her new husband, attorney Harold Abelies. All 3 kids, Melissa, Jonathan, and Sarah, ended up becoming TV stars. Melissa didn't just fall into fame. She earned it. Before she turned 5, she was already doing commercials. One of the most famous came in 1977 when she starred in an Alpo dog food ad with Lorne Greene. Greene and Gilbert had natural chemistry, and the ad featured her gushing about her dog Fluffy winning a blue ribbon. At just 9 years old, Melissa Gilbert stepped into a casting room filled with more than 500 hopeful girls and left with a role that would define her for life. It was early 1973, and NBC was searching nationwide for the perfect child to play Laura Ingalls in a new pilot. When Melissa walked in and began her screen test with Michael Landon, something happened. He didn't just see a young actress. He saw his on-screen daughter. He later said there was a magic in her performance. She wasn't acting, she was Laura. And right there at the Burbank Studios, her life changed forever. The funny part? Melissa had no idea who Landon was. She'd never watched Bonanza, a show that had made him a star for 14 straight years. So when she auditioned, she didn't act nervous or try to impress him with compliments. She just played the scene. That honesty, that lack of polish, was exactly what Landon had been hoping to find. She didn't see him as a celebrity. She saw him as Pa. That bond, that effortless connection, will become the heart of Little House on the Prairie for the next 9 years. Even the way Melissa found out she got the role felt like something out of a TV drama. One day at school, a classmate named Leslie Landon, Michael Landon's real daughter, came up to her with a huge smile and said, "My dad picked you." No phone call, no studio announcement. Just 2 girls in the school hallway. And years later, those same 2 girls will be back on set, Leslie playing schoolteacher Ada Plum in the final seasons of the show. Melissa filmed the pilot in the summer of 1973 in the scenic hills of California. It aired the following March and pulled in over 17 million viewers. That was huge, but even after that success, she had to wait nearly a year to find out if the show will become a full series. For a kid, that kind of waiting feels like forever. But by June 1974, filming began again, and Little House on the Prairie was officially born. It would run until 1983, 9 full seasons of family hardship and frontier life. One moment sealed her fate. During her final audition, she had to act out a scene where Laura says goodbye to her dog. It was tough, real tears, real pain. Landon was watching closely, and by the end, he had tears in his eyes. She moved him, and not many adult actors could do that, let alone a child. It wasn't training, it wasn't technique, it was raw, emotional honesty. That day, he knew she wasn't just playing Laura Ingalls. She was her. From ages 10 to 19, Melissa wasn't just playing a character. She was growing up in front of an entire country. At its peak, the show drew more than 20 million viewers per episode every week. She was in America's living room. Millions watch her lose baby teeth, grow taller, go through puberty, all on camera. No child in history had ever been watched this closely for that long. It was more than just a show. It was a national event unfolding one episode at a time. While most kids were riding bikes or doing homework, Melissa was memorizing lines and getting camera ready at dawn. But school didn't stop. Instead of attending a traditional classroom, she learned right there on set. Tutors would jump in between takes, giving quick, focused lessons to meet state education laws. It wasn't easy, but it worked. She and the other child actors formed a tight-knit group, kids who lived in 2 worlds at once, student and star. Even with the heavy schedule, Melissa found time to take on roles that proved she wasn't just a one-show wonder. In 1979, she starred in The Miracle Worker at just 15, playing Helen Keller. It was intense and emotional, and it earned her an Emmy nomination. A year later, she played in Frank in another dramatic role. Again, another nomination. These weren't just cute kid roles. These were some of the hardest young characters in television, and she nailed them all while still filming Little House. But the wildest part of Melissa's story isn't the fame or the awards. It's how deeply she became Laura Ingalls. The character didn't just stay on the screen. Laura's values, struggles, and strength became part of who Melissa was. She said that Little House wasn't just a job. It was her childhood, her family, her entire world. By the time the show ended, there was no clear line between who she was and who she played. The character helped raise her. When Dean Butler was cast as Almanzo Wilder in Season 6 of Little House on the Prairie, he was 23 years old. Melissa Gilbert, who played Laura Ingalls, was just 15. That 8-year difference might not sound like much now, but back in 1979, it felt like a canyon. Dean even called it the Grand Canyon of age gaps. For a show that aired during Family Hour and prided itself on wholesome storytelling, this pairing raised eyebrows, not just among viewers, but within the cast itself. Melissa was still in high school, Dean was out of college, and yet they were expected to play sweethearts, romantic scenes, emotional closeness, and a first kiss, all on screen, all for millions to watch. That decision, made by the producers, created tension and discomfort that never really went away. Melissa didn't hide how she felt. When she first heard Dean was cast, her emotions exploded. She called it a perfect storm of disappointment, fear, anger, and nausea. She had imagined acting opposite someone close to her age, someone who understood what it meant to be a teenager. Instead, they brought in a man with stubble, a man she'd be expected to kiss and get close to on screen, expected to kiss. But that wasn't just acting. it became real. In the episode titled Sweet 16, Laura gets her first kiss, and so did Melissa. It wasn't just her first kiss on camera. It was her first kiss ever. No dates, no experience, nothing to prepare her for it. Just a film crew, bright lights, and nearly 100 people staring as the cameras rolled. Dean Butler knew it was awkward. He later admitted he was nervous, really nervous. She was just a little girl. He said, it was hard. He knew that in today's Hollywood, this kind of casting would never fly. It would be rejected instantly. But back then, it happened, and it became one of the most talked about moments in the show's history. What made it even harder was what happened off-screen. Melissa's mother, Barbara A. Blease, stood behind the cameras watching as her daughter leaned in for that kiss. Barbara broke down crying. This wasn't a proud moment. It was a painful one. Her little girl was growing up, not in private, but in front of the world on a set with a grown man for ratings. Dean remembered it clearly. He later wrote in his memoir Prairie Man that Barbara never liked the idea of him being cast. When the kiss happened, her disapproval turned to heartbreak. She couldn't bear seeing me kiss her daughter, he said. Melissa, meanwhile, was trying everything to avoid it. She begged Michael Landon, the show's creator, to change the scene. Can't it just be a hug? She'd ask, desperate to stay within her comfort zone. But the scripts kept coming, kiss after kiss, scene after scene, and every time she had to play the part, even when she felt sick, even when she had never felt love in real life, even when she was terrified. And viewers noticed. Some loved the romance. Others were horrified. One mother wrote to a newspaper demanding that the casting director be burned at the stake for pairing a teenage girl with a grown man. Dean Butler got letters, too. Some fans said watching those scenes made them feel uneasy, and they weren't wrong. A 1979 article predicted it would be the most difficult role of the season, not because of the lines, but because of the reality. Dean Butler may have the trickiest role of the 1979 to 80 TV season. It read, he has to convince viewers that it's okay for a grown man to fall in love with pubescent girl. Despite the backlash, the episode was a massive hit. Sweet 16 topped the Nielsen ratings and was aired twice. In prime time that summer, it became iconic. Years later, TV Land would even give them an award for the most memorable kiss in television history. But what was the cost? A 15-year-old girl forced into adult emotions, a mother left crying in the shadows, an actor who felt deeply uncomfortable, and an industry that, at the time, put ratings above everything else. Dean later said, you just couldn't do it today. He's right. Times have changed, standards have changed, and thankfully, so has the way Hollywood treats young actors. But for Melissa Gilbert, that change came too late. Her childhood was shaped by a script she didn't write. Melissa Gilbert's life looked picture-perfect on TV, but behind the scenes, everything was falling apart. While millions watched her grow up as Laura Ingalls on Little House on the Prairie, Melissa was quietly slipping into addiction. It started in her teenage years and got worse fast. By the time she was an adult, she was drinking 2 full bottles of wine every night. That wasn't just casual drinking, it was survival, and it nearly killed her. One night, while she had a dinner guest over, she blacked out and passed out in her dog's bed. That was the moment she finally realized she couldn't keep living like this. But alcohol wasn't her only escape. She was also using cocaine. Fame had made her lonely, and the constant pressure being a child star never let up. The drugs numbed it all for a while, but the damage showed up in every corner of her life. Her relationships suffered. Her parenting suffered, and eventually her own son, in a heartbreaking moment, begged her to stop drinking. That plea hit her harder than anything else ever had. It was the wake-up call she couldn't ignore. She joined Alcoholics Anonymous the next day. The 12-step program became her lifeline. Sitting in those meetings, hearing others share their darkest stories, she finally felt less alone. She opened up in her 2009 memoir Prairie Tale, telling the truth about her addictions, failed relationships, and emotional wreckage left behind by a childhood spent under the spotlight. But the trauma didn't stop there. In the early 1990s, Melissa auditioned for a role in Oliver Stone's film The Doors. What happened next haunted her for years. According to Gilbert, Stone wanted revenge. She had once made negative comment about him publicly, and now, during the audition, he set her up. He handed her a scene he claimed he had just written for her. It wasn't a real scene. It was a trap. The lines were graphic. She had to get on her hands and knees and repeat the words, "Do me, baby." She felt humiliated as tears filled her eyes. Stone looked at her coldly and said, "Good. That will make it better." The casting director had mysteriously stepped out, leaving her alone with Stone and another actor. She ran out in tears. To this day, she believed the whole thing was a calculated punishment. Stone later denied it, but Gilbert never backed down. Then came her marriage to Bo Brinkman. On the surface, it was a Hollywood romance, but within 6 weeks of meeting, they were engaged and heading straight for disaster. He was emotionally abusive, an alcoholic, and constantly unfaithful. Their 6-year marriage was a slow-motion collapse. Brinkman didn't just cheat. He did it shamelessly. One of the worst betrayals came when he allegedly slept with Shannon Doherty, Melissa's former Little House co-star. Doherty had once looked up to her like a big sister, but now she had become part of her heartbreak. At the time, Shannon was barely 19, and Brinkman was around 40. Years later, when asked what she'd say if she saw Doherty again, Melissa didn't hesitate. "I wouldn't say anything," she said. "I'd just punch her in the nose." But that betrayal was nothing compared to what came next. Just 2 months after Melissa had a C-section and gave birth to their son,